Good evening, this is the Oscar Expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time to review Green Border. This is directed by Agnieszka Holland, who has quite a lot of films behind her at this point, spanning several decades, but this is the first that I've seen, to be honest. I do know that a lot of her filmography includes films about the Holocaust, which I think is an interesting context going into this film, which is about the dehumanization of migrants and refugees at the Polish and Belarus border. I have seldom seen a film that is so authentic about its activism. Agnieszka Holland not only makes activist film pieces, but she is known to actually do work with refugees. For example, at our Q&A, we found out that she provided a home for Ukrainian refugees. And critically, this would be a very different film if it was about Ukrainian refugees, because the subjects of this film are from countries like Turkey and Afghanistan, where they're running away from terrorism or authoritarian regimes. And because they are brown, they do not have the passport that white skin seems to offer you. When it comes to gaining access to the European Union, these human beings are treated like political football between Poland and Belarus. Both of these governments want no less than to simply abandon the people at this border, leaving them to wither and die. And the Polish government has an active campaign to discredit those who attempt to challenge this system and to expose the human rights abuses that are occurring there. As for the film itself, it is about many different players in this crisis. At first, it's about families attempting to seek asylum who are running through the woods, and then it's about the activists who are trying to help them. It's about the border guards. It's a sweeping portrait of all the players in this catastrophe, and it felt extremely authentic and real. I came away from this movie feeling like I had just seen a great documentary, and one person in the audience commented that they were very familiar with this crisis and that the film seemed to be extremely accurate. I found the movie to be extremely uncomfortable and upsetting and eye-opening to what's actually going on. The treatment of these people by the border guards, never failing to point out that these are just agents of the government carrying out these atrocious acts. It will not leave you with the impression that this is just bad border guards. It made me very sad that it is illegal to help people. The fact that there are just people in the woods who cannot do anything except for try not to die, and they need people to help them, and that's like illegal. The movie challenges the audience very directly on their own passivity to human rights violations. Something that the director said before the film was that she does have faith in humanity, and the movie does show a lot of the activism that can help. This movie is not hiding its message in metaphor. It challenges the audience's privilege and the excuses that we make to not do anything. The message of the movie is literally that you should help to illegally bring people across the border, house them in your home, and give them food and clothing. Like, it's very, very direct. And I think that works for this type of story. There's no need to make the message about something like more philosophical than that. I like how immediate the approach was, because this is something that's happening currently. The way that it creates those moments of chaos and horror, I think they're honestly like masterfully done. Sometimes it just left me in awe thinking how many things were happening in one scene, and how the director was able to portray all of it realistically in a way that felt like you were there. The cinematography here was striking. The entire film is in an unglamorous black and white, and I wouldn't say there's a heavy style here, except that the handheld camera feels like it's in the most essential place at all times. Some people might struggle to connect emotionally with the film because it doesn't provide you with characters to consistently empathize with, because it jumps between stories. But I thought these stories intersected really well in the end. Sure, it might not milk the most tears out of the audience by trying to portray these events organically rather than sentimentally, but I think it's the right approach for this sort of story. And I don't think I've seen a movie this year that feels as vital as this one and as urgent. Not only is there a humanitarian crisis at this border, but borders throughout the globe. It definitely made me reflect on the Mexican border too. The attitudes that people sometimes have. People thinking that bringing your family across the border is just a careless move that a parent would make, when that has to be the most desperate, like, last resort thing you want to do as a parent. Yeah, they really do interrogate some of the propaganda that is disseminated throughout the world that influences our perception of migrants. And on that note, it's important to point out that some of the scores for this film, particularly audience scores, are not going to be accurate because the Polish government has attempted to discredit Agnieszka Holland as a Nazi by disseminating their own propaganda. I mean, what a fucking joke that a person who's standing up for human rights can be called a Nazi. The movie is pretty long at 2.5 hours, and I can see some people having issues with like where the focus ends up being, or maybe it loses the migrants and focuses a lot more on the activists in the second half. which, maybe is true. At the same time, the focus on the activists I think is really interesting because I think this director understands who is going to be watching her movie. And it's probably not going to be the migrants. A lot of films like this are intended to be like intellectual exercises for people to like understand what's going on, and I think this movie pushed past that. I would give this movie a 9 out of 10. Probably defies a rating in some sense, but in terms of the impact for me, I would give this an 8 out of 10. I had this on my international feature list for a long time. I just watched the movie and I was like, yeah, international feature, but we just kind of brought up the fact that like the director is an enemy of the state. Will that impact this film being submitted for the International Film Oscar? I feel like it would. Each country needs to submit a film from an approved organization, and I don't know how heavily that is tied to the government or whether that is entirely independent. But even if it is a little bit, it won't get submitted because of this. Definitely check it out whether or not it gets that nomination. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Which country would you like to seek asylum in?